And I'm so happy to have my friend Mallory Meyer here. And I feel like we've already done the live without doing the live, just the conversations we have. And it's such a privilege to have you here because we've gotten to know each other within the Co-Created Hub. And I've had the pleasure of experiencing the magic of your work and being someone who use all these different spiritual tools but also this science of our nervous system and what that's like what actually happens within the body. I just really admire, Mallory, how you blend it all together. So thank you for being here with me today, and I'm excited to see what is going to come up for us.
Yeah, me too. Like you said, it's kind of been like an offline conversation in the live that we're holding here today and just bringing it forward for everyone else to hear. But there's so much that we can kind of unpack and unfold in those realms. And just so grateful to have met you through the Co-Created Hub and be able to see these beautiful synergies in like our paths and also being Canadian,
Yes.
definitely having strong roots there, but just also love that we started this live stream at 11:11.
Did
So,
we? Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Well, no wonder. Of course, we had to chat a little bit before we went live because we needed to wait till 11:11, right?
completely. Had
I
the
think it's
divine synchronicity come forward and just bring in everything with the technology like we were talking about earlier. Perfection.
Oh, it's so good. And I think it's so beautiful, just those synchronicities that we do surround, like that are happening around us and for us all the time. But sometimes we don't really take the moments to be still to notice.
Mhm.
And we were just talking about this before, that stillness of like coming out of the weekend into this week and giving ourselves that permission over the weekend to embrace the stillness and like not feel like we have to do. And I love what one of my mentors said to me, Dr. Melissa Bird, when I like all the times where I'm like, oh, I have this urgency within me that I have to do because I'm excited. And she's like, resting is doing. And
Mhm.
just having that switch in my mind of like, oh yeah, resting is doing and like I'm worthy of rest
Yes.
wasn't something that my body was like comfortable with, I think, for a long, long time. So how does that, when it comes to that, like embracing stillness and like the way our body responds from, going from like a work week where we're
Mhm.
do and busy, busy, busy to like the stillness of the weekend. How does that like show up in our body, or what is important for us to know about what how our nervous system supports us and how we can support it in those like not extremes. I don't know if they're extremes. I don't know if you have a better word for it, but in that fluctuation, I guess.
Yeah, completely, because I think that is such a common like, I know I've had my own kind of uphill battle in that sense of, like, acknowledging it's actually safe to rest, and I don't need to be either also, like, in control can be a huge mindset piece of that of, like, I feel like I won't have control if I don't actually execute and do. So, one of the biggest things, at least when it comes to, like, finding that solace within ourselves and finding that anchor of safety, to know like that disconnection, like you were saying, even when we go on vacation, it
Mm,
can be really activating for ourselves to like not necessarily be tapped in all the time. And it's more so just showing more than telling, which is what we're so familiar with to say, yeah, I can disconnect. Yeah, I can like not log in for this period of time or not do this. But how can you actually, beyond the words itself, that you can self coach yourself to say, it's okay. Someone's my backup. Someone's taking care of this. I don't need to worry about this. It
mm,
can wait. How can we actually show our bodies in that moment that it can be safe to rest? And there's different little attributes that we can invite in when it comes to whether that's more of like bringing in some somatics to be able to bring in like self-soothing mechanisms to feel and show our nervous system like I am actually safe here.
mm.
Or it's also like maybe it's even going for a walk sometimes, depending on that state of the nervous system, to feel that grounded and connectedness within ourselves of back to like the anchoring of safety. Like
Yeah.
no one's gonna die. Everything is okay. I can be here and be present for myself. And the more that we can bring that essence and that embodiment to really feel that visceral experience, the more it will start to shift in our mind to be able to feel more of like what you were even mentioning, like the fluidity to come back to
Mhm.
that with less resistance
Yeah.
ultimately. And so for me, like tapping is a huge
Mm,
piece of like self-soothing to be able to show my body like both from the cognitive perspective, so the top down and like this the talking through it, but then also feeling, but also too like the visualization at
mhm.
times of like even if it's in meditation, just feeling myself actually like read a book with a cup of tea and put my phone in the other room and not be distracted because that's part of it. Like, are we actually in the moment resting, or is our mind still wired to be able to do things?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, kicking the phone out to the other room or, like, leaving it somewhere is the best thing ever, but, like, most a lot of people just, like, whether it be with work or kids, like, really perhaps don't feel like that could be accessible for them, right? Like, in a very kind of real world, but I think looking for those, like, opportunities where we get to do that and we get to, like, tune out. I remember a colleague of mine who would put in the shared, work calendar, the shared office calendar, it would be like, "Don't touch me time," and it was, like, his time, and it's, like, no one reach out to him, no one email him, no one expect him to respond, like and so he gave himself that container of time, right? But it
Yeah.
was never something I'd ever actually seen practiced before in any workplace that I worked in, so I was like, "Huh, like, there's gotta be something here," but again, like, I never thought of it, of
Mhm.
it being something that I get to do because of maybe like the expectations that were surrounding me, whether it be external, whether it be ones that I created for myself based on what I thought I needed to do, like just juggling that and also like that self permission for
Yeah.
space. I think, I definitely had to learn like in these last few years, but I really, admire seeing people do that in different ways and just kind of like being able to say, okay, this is how I'm gonna create that space for myself because it can be difficult.
Mhm. I know that especially now when we think about, like, the workplace culture in the sense of, like, there's so many people that work from home, remote workers, and even just entrepreneurs, like, how do we really disconnect at
Yeah.
the end of the day when we're in environments of our home that are so conducive to being work like, actually cultivating the space of work?
Mm,
So for me, especially, like, coaching as well, I had to have almost like a ritual in place, similar to your colleague, where it was like, "Do not touch me time," type
mhm,
of thing, of just really being, like, very intentional to say, come, let's say, like, 5:30, 6 p.m., I'm
mhm.
gonna get up and I'm actually gonna move, I'm gonna disconnect, I'm gonna go outside, and having something that will actually show again, not only our bodies, but our mind, like, this is the end. And
Yeah.
that's, like, a big thing that we can find when we don't necessarily disconnect, like, it just continues into the evening. So what's maybe an experience that you can bring in, even if it's just, like, maybe putting on a song and having, like, a dance party,
Oh my
right?
gosh,
Like,
let's do that. Yes, I love
that
it.
can be a very, like, good experience just for your body to say, "We're done, we're
Yeah,
disconnecting," and this is kinda, like, my way of, yeah,
yeah.
anchoring into that deeper.
I think those rituals are so important, like, those spiritual practices and those rituals that we
Mm,
get to create, and also knowing, like, they get to look different every day based on our capacity. I think that's something that I've given myself more grace for, like, in my morning where I have well, and I like to create the most spaciousness I can, but it looks like tapping before I get out of bed and doing journaling and hypnosis audio, but some days I'm like, "I really don't wanna do that," and so I adapt it, like, I still create that space, like, I was telling a friend the other day, when I don't feel like grabbing for my journal, I'll literally imagine and visualize
yeah,
in my head. Sometimes I'll move my hand in the air and I will write my affirmations or like start kind of journaling like in my mind in the sky and I don't even care because I'm like, okay, like this gets to be my lazy version.
yeah,
But I still get to show up for it, right? Like that consistency. But it's so funny where I'm like, whatever, like I get to do that.
yeah.
Right?
Completely. I think having that agency and choice is just, like that's part of, yes, the nervous system too, is, like, expanding
Mm,
it, feeling that safety, but it's funny that you bring that up because of just myself yesterday, but I went through the same exercise where I was too lazy to journal, and I was like, "I'm just gonna visualize what I'm writing in my journal," because
Yeah.
I'm just so yeah, it's funny how
It's
lazy
so
we can feel
good. I love
sometimes.
that you did that. I feel like more people we just need to talk about it more and more. Maybe
Yeah.
more people will realize that they get to do it too, right?
The impact, but very much like you said too, like giving yourself that permission, giving yourself that grace of saying, "Yes, I have my rituals, but they don't need to necessarily be like." So this is kind of where we can get back into like that control almost for me of
Right.
recognizing where can we open up more to flow
Mm,
to let's like how we started today, like the divine. And yes, it's a ritual, but it doesn't need to be so like to the T in my schedule at this time.
mhm.
Maybe that goes in your evening instead of, like,
Yeah,
tapping, and it's still there, that consistency, but you're also opening up to more flow, surrendering to your needs, and just giving
yeah,
yourself, like, without having that guilt, the
right.
element of, "You didn't do it this morning, that doesn't mean it's not gonna get done."
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And for people who maybe don't have any of the like are in that fight or flight or in that survival mode who are going like day to day from work to home to feeding people, just all these busy things within the day who maybe haven't really even like considered this idea of creating a practice for themselves or those rituals. Like, what is a way that you find, I know there's so many tools, but when it comes to like them even just understanding what's happening in their body, like this, and their nervous system that might kind of just invite them to take that
Mhm.
pause or begin to realize, like, okay, this is actually what's happening for me right now. This is why I'm feeling like I can't get out of this loop.
Mhm. There's so many yeah, like, that's a rabbit hole question
Yeah,
because
right?
There's there's so many different ways, but the thing that comes to mind as you were saying that is, like, for me, I when I was envisioning, like, that avatar almost of someone that's on the go, they're, like, just
Mhm.
kind of in, like, autopilot, let's be
Yeah,
honest, in that sense of, like, there's no moment to even catch a breath,
yeah.
almost just, like, signaling how deeply needed the breath can be as a resource here, and even let's say they're driving from, like, work back home to pick up the kids, having, like, these micro moments, and this is, like, the biggest thing when it comes into, like, working with individuals is, like, bringing in micro moments, let's say every 2 hours, so
Mhm.
you can start to realign more quickly, but also just have a gentle awareness to say, "Why do I feel like I can't even pause? Why
Yeah.
does it feel like I can't" like, in those moments too, when we're always kinda giving and we're always kind of being the extension for someone else, why
Mm,
can't we just peel back and come into ourselves just for that quick 30 seconds?
yeah.
So for me, it would be almost like a quick invitation here for anyone that's is watching and, like, catching the replay to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how deeply am I either stressed or feeling anxious, like, whatever that most predominant sensation and emotion is in their body, and
Mhm.
just letting them be like, "Okay, maybe it's an 8, which is high, I wanna bring it down, but
Mm,
why is it an 8?" Like, don't just kind of give it a number, just get curious behind why are you associating this 8? Is it actually in your control? Like, what can you start to let go of? Because that's, again, the biggest piece, and then for me, it's always, like, in these micro moments, very, very quick tools to come back within to start to bring that number down, and
mhm.
with that avatar, I was just thinking about havening, right? Like,
Oh,
having
yes.
lateral stimulation to self-soothe, because you could do that anywhere and really start to bring that conscious awareness back to that breath to
Yeah,
already start to feel,
yeah,
"Hey, like, maybe,
yeah,
like, this is just, like, that moment for me." But
yeah.
there are so deeply, deeply, as you know too, like, the subconscious rooted patterns, but starting to just be the observer
Mhm.
and getting curious about, like, is this my anxiety, or is it the anxiety that someone else is putting on me, and I just need to maybe communicate better boundaries, and that can be
Yeah,
a really key piece, like, I know that's come up for me a lot in the past, so I'll use that as a
mhm,
reference too of, like,
yeah,
feeling the anxiety because other people hold this expectation of a deliverable that I haven't maybe expressed what I'm
right,
actually able to execute on
right. And
needs.
and it's interesting that too because I know I've had a very difficult time in the past and in past workplaces where the vision that I was, you know, being asked to deliver was so different from what instinctively like my intuition was, or even like the my approach would be based on my values, and like having to deliver something that in my mind like didn't fully make sense or feel like it was the best outcome for the client, but was
Mhm.
what, you know, maybe my superior had envisioned, or a promise that they made because the client, you know, doesn't really like want or doesn't really care about having it the best outcome, but just it looking like it is impressive, or
Yeah.
or, you know, like that I think can be really difficult too when we work for other people. And for me, that really like that's where I really like that was the turning point for me because my body was what was reacting like crazy. Like,
Mm.
I ended up with appendicitis after that experience, you know, with you know, other things happening in the environment, but it very deeply affected how I was feeling in my body and not
Mhm.
feeling safe and not feeling heard. Um, and it can be yeah, it can be hard when you're feeling stuck in this situation
Mhm.
with no way out. And so for people who may be experiencing that as well, um, you know, obviously you suggested like this technique and there's so many other tools, but what kind of things, you know, hearing like when people may be in those situations that you would either share with them or even from like your knowledge of what's happening in the body, like what could
Mhm.
be important for them to know?
Like, it's so interesting to hear that situation that you went through because it very much, like, similarly in that sense, like, feeling that physical manifestation of essentially, like, misalignment, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
charting a path that wasn't in my highest intention,
Yeah.
and very much so just acknowledging, like, for one, the body is now at this point of, like, we've been under such chronic stress, ultimately, that's what it's signaling to, of, like, we haven't been able to access and activate that parasympathetic to truly come into homeostasis, to
Mhm.
be able to restore, to rejuvenate, to regenerate in ways of which our energy can be nourished, right? But
Yeah.
for me, that's a huge signal of, like, things need to shift
Mhm.
in your day to day, in how you are showing up. There's that's kind of like we don't even wanna get to that point, honestly, because then that's really where there's almost no other choice but sometimes to leave because you've been put under such, like your
Yeah.
adrenal fatigues are starting to get shot, your high cortisol. So
Mhm.
when you're already starting to feel maybe even, like, within your heart space, or maybe you're already starting to feel even in the body, like, "This isn't feeling right," and this is just constantly going back into, like, that uphill battle. What's the biggest, smallest step that you can also take? Like, we want a big vision, but sometimes we can get so caught up when we're talking about perfectionism, of
Right.
feeling like we're unable to attain it because that whole big picture feels so far away. So it's
Mhm.
kinda just reverse engineering at that point. What's maybe the smallest step? Like, maybe there's a point for me, to be honest, like, when I reflect back on my journey, I was starting to recognize, like, I'm giving 100%. What
Yeah.
if I was just to pull back to 80%? Still obviously, like, deliver the caliber of the work that everyone had the expectation of me to bring, but also the 20% was to go back into me.
Mhm.
Yes, and then starting to, like, slowly see that bridge and starting to like, also show myself
Mhm.
showing up at 80% instead of, like, the 100% go, go, go was safe.
Yeah.
Nothing was gonna happen, like, I wasn't gonna get
Yeah.
fired by showing up at 80% now, and this was starting to, like, allow me to get more reprieve, to start to just, like, witness, I can take a walk and,
Mhm.
block off my calendar and maybe calm down or reconnect and just be more present in that way.
Mhm.
I think it's just coming back into, like, what's the smallest first step in this big vision to start to like, there's a beautiful book, and it was interesting that we're just now on this, like, thread because I
Mhm,
haven't necessarily I've read more of the Cole's notes of it, but maybe you've heard of it, like The Gap and the Gain?
mhm. I haven't read that book actually.
Okay, it's essentially about money, and the premise of it right now is, like, we're talking about this,
Mhm,
is we're so focused on the gap versus the gain,
mhm,
and the gap being where we're striving to be, looking in, like, comparison to others and seeing where they're at and being like, "I'm not there," or "Why
yeah,
can't I be there?" And that's the gap versus looking at the gain of how far we've already come. So, like, even starting to show yourself of I've overcome this, and I can overcome this now
yeah,
in the present, and just kind of bringing that evidence forward of the gains versus being so focused on that gap.
yeah.
So,
I love
different
that, and
threads, I feel like that I
yeah,
just brought in there, but
yeah,
it's so unique for each individual and on their circumstance, but I just would always come back into, like, what's true for me,
mhm,
and also
yeah,
feeling safe enough to actually go to the worst case scenario because sometimes we'll sit in avoidance of putting ourselves in the emotions of what could happen, and very much even when I chose to resign, for the longest time, I didn't even want to resign because
mhm,
my mind had this model that if I resign, then I'm gonna, like, worst case, like, homeless type of
yeah,
elements here, right? And I was like, "But what actually would happen?" And actually taking myself there really brought me back into a place of safety to know I can overcome this, I can do this, and the worst really the worst? Like, I have to move back in with my parents type of
yeah.
right? Like, that would be that.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's so much safety that, gets to be created, I think, in those yeah, and really knowing, like, the worst case scenario perhaps really isn't the worst.
Or yeah, what our mind's really showing us, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It's amazing. I feel like there's so many other threads that I, like, want to go off with this, one of which I feel like just even if we touch on it briefly, is, like, this idea of unattachment, right?
Mhm.
Of not like, I feel like a big piece of this, like, urgency or being wrapped up in the expectations comes with this attachment to the outcome, right? Attachment
Mhm.
to the recognition, attachment to getting that gold star or that, promotion or just like words of affirmation, that external praise. Or it can be, I don't know, there's so many other things, but that attachment to like responsibility of like, if this fails, I'm a failure, right? Those labels that
Mhm.
you make. And so, in your experience, what are some things perhaps that maybe you've had to overcome in order to, whether it be about attachment or perfectionism or expectations, like what are some of the things that have really been so life changing for you to begin to release?
Mhm. So many things, like, this whole journey in itself has been so huge. I mean, there's 2 strong examples, even 3 that come up, like and I'm thinking about even, like, the audience here and, like, ways to, like, really speak to it. Like, one even comes into, like, detachment when I was doing more, like, training athletically of, like, detachment to the goal of, like, what the time was that I wanted to meet in the race. But
Right.
very much like kinda how we started to of, like, resting and detaching from the need to constantly be having an output to reach a certain performance milestone and actually taking that time with my coaches at like who are helping me with running and doing these triathlons to say you need rest days, you need recovery days to be
Mhm.
able to come back stronger. So it was like detaching from that need of constantly feeling that outlet or that need to go. Then
Yeah.
there's also, like, detachment in very much, like, from a corporate standpoint when you were talking about meeting the responsibilities and the expectations of others, detaching from, like, how others are perceiving you and the perception that they may have. And that was a huge thing because it was, like, not only from a people-pleasing standpoint, but very much from, like, being in control.
Yeah.
Really just letting for me, there was, like, a lot of visualization in the sense of, like, even having, like, this almost like a funhouse mirror when sometimes people would talk to me, and I felt like they were either projecting or they had
Mhm.
this misperception that it would be mirrored back to them, and it wasn't something that I had to energetically take on. And it
Right.
was just understanding, like, this is their model, this is how now knowing, like, NLP so much deeper, I can
Yeah.
really give more empathy and compassion to that, but that was a journey in itself to detach from having to control their outcome, to control their response, and just let it go. Like, I'm not going to be able to save that maybe relationship at this time, but it is what it's meant to be, and
Yeah.
finding acceptance in that. And then
Mhm.
the biggest thing in my entrepreneurial journey has been detachment from my like, the financial outcomes too,
Right.
in what I'm looking to achieve, and almost when it comes to, like, when I'm talking to like, even individuals that are interested to work together, let's use an example like that,
Mhm.
coaches out there, we hear so often, maybe even coming off a sales call, like, someone
Mhm.
is like, "I'm in," but they haven't maybe made that monetary exchange and the energy exchange.
Right.
How can we really just for me, detachment is, like, this theory of, like, let them. Let
Yeah.
them come to, like, their own, like, acceptance.
Mhm.
I've shown up in the best way possible. Have I asked the right questions? Have I asked questions in the sense, like, I've made myself present and available and maybe
Yeah.
even followed up? But at this point in of the course of, like, the detachment is trusting that
Mhm.
who is meant for me will find me, will be
Yeah.
able to say yes when they're ready to say yes, and I get to honor all the spectrum of humanities in this world of coaching that are ready to invest immediately, and some
Yeah.
that do need more nurturing, and
Mhm.
just finding evidence of that along the way.
Yeah.
So, 3 different examples of detachment, like,
Yeah.
find rest, detachment to let other people's
Mhm.
emotions and perceptions not dictate
Yeah.
who I am and, like, not dictate the authenticity that I wanna show up in, and then also 'cause sometimes even, like, I noticed this will come up too last year when I went on a retreat, even the detachment to, like, have everyone like you.
Right.
I'm not gonna be for everyone, and that's been a huge acceptance journey too, of
Mm.
yeah, it would be exhausting to be liked by
Yeah.
everyone, truly,
I
so
think that's really they're all so interesting and important, and I think this very last one you mentioned too of, like, this detachment for being liked. I have felt myself energetically the more I do meet people who are like-hearted and that I, like, were once strangers, but I feel that bond with and that connection with, the more I have met more of those people where we, like, have that reciprocated, ability to see each other and support each other and hear each other, the more I've noticed, like, naturally that desire to be liked to
Mhm,
naturally, like, fade away, knowing, like, I've gotten to meet these people who who, you know and as projectors, right? Like,
mhm,
to be recognized is a big part of our design, right? And
yeah,
so being able to surrender to that, I think has really, for myself, given myself that permission to just, like, no, like, it gets yeah, I don't have to be for everyone. I get to, find those people that, may only be here for a season or, may
mhm,
be here for a lifetime, whatever it may be, like, share that like, that, yeah, that connection in a different way than perhaps on that surface level or that superficial level rather.
mhm, completely. That's one of my favorite sayings, "Is it a reason, a season, or a lifetime that
Right.
someone's in my world?"
Totally. And I don't think I grew up realizing or, like, knowing, like, people fall away and it doesn't have to be, like, a big bad thing,
Yeah,
right? I think I grew up seeing, like, on television or hearing stories where it's like someone had a falling out and that's why they're not in each other's lives anymore, and it has to be this big dark thing, but really knowing, like, okay, maybe it gets to be sad that someone's not in our lives, but maybe it's not where we need to, like, still put our energy into, right? Like, we get to, you
yeah,
know, realize lesson, that season, or the reason, the
the season.
season. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, like, it's to me, like, it really is a testament to our own evolution as well, of, like,
Mhm.
raising our consciousness and finding those, like, now that are more of, like, that energetic match, and very much even, like, when we think about social media, in my older business, this was a very common sentiment that I heard of, like, "I'm losing followers. This
Right.
isn't good." And I was like, "How is this actually could be, like, reframed to be good because now you're actually calling in
Yeah.
those as you're starting to show up in your higher truth, those
Yeah.
that are actually here that wanna be part of it, and you're
Right.
knowing who's not." So it's
Yeah.
clearing.
Anytime I remember my first coach saying that anytime someone unsubscribes to your newsletter, it just means like there's another space open for someone
Exactly.
who wants to be there, right? And I think that energy behind it, like allowing yourself that shift in your perception is just it changes everything. It's
For sure. And I get back to, like, the disrupting perfectionism, right? Like, finding these little moments of when am I like, when is my inner critic wanting to kinda come forward, where I can be less of, like, a judge and more of a witness through this
Mhm.
all. Because it is just, like and you know so deeply with inner child work, like, it's
Mm,
really just our inner child acting out to say and wanting the attention and wanting something
yeah.
with validation. So how can we become that nurturing parent
Mm,
for the inner us that
yeah.
we maybe
Yeah.
never got?
Oh, it's so true. I was reading I've been listening to this audiobook for, like, over a year because I'll come back to it and I'll, just put it away for months, but, the book Welcome Home, by
Mm,
Nashwa Zabian, yeah, I was listening to it before today and before we got on our call today and just, like, I love this book, and I'm like, "Why did I ever stop?" But it was like, that seasonal thing where I just put it down to focus on something else, but truly, like, having that home inside ourselves and she was talking about that in the I don't even know what chapter I'm on because 'cause I'm listening to the audio version, but, like, just getting to a place where that external forgiveness or that forgiveness doesn't happen, like, outside of ourselves, it gets to happen within ourselves, and it's just
mhm.
yeah, like, there's just so much in us that we get to experience and stop, looking for outside of ourselves, but
Completely, and I'm gonna pin that book because I haven't read it
awesome.
myself, and I have so many credits on Audible right now that I like
Yes.
reading books.
There
So
you go, your next Audible.
for sure. But I, like, would always come back, like, in these, like, dark moments and, like, quote, unquote, when I say dark, the
Mhm.
moments that are less, like, ideal to be
Yeah,
navigating, right? Especially
yeah.
when we're talking about, yes, like, perfectionism, but one of the thoughts can always be, like, I came to this, like, my soul this is more energetics, but my soul chose to come to this earth to be in this body for an
Mhm,
experience. And
mhm.
what fun would it be if everything was perfect? If
Right.
everything was just kind of, like, going its course the way that it was meant to be. So, there's always a lesson in, like, these moments where I feel like I just want to, like, burn it all down or call it
Mhm,
quits, and ways of which I can still choose to show up and
mhm.
remember this is for a greater mission and purpose and being of service. Yeah,
Yeah, and this one moment isn't the end of it all. It's just like
completely.
yeah, it just gets
Finding those moments to detach from it. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Mallory. I know we could go on and on forever. I feel like there's so many beautiful threads that we were led down. And I wondered if you would be willing to, I think my cards are here. If I were to pull one of my celebration cards, which have prompts to
Yes,
celebrate yourself, if you'd be willing to respond to one of the prompts.
for sure. I love
Yay.
this.
Great. This is my prototype. I'm hoping to get
Oh, fun.
these actually created this year, but they're all different prompts for people to share a moment or an example or just a space to celebrate themselves. So
Oh, that's so beautiful.
pick a random card. Let's see. Oh, I love this one. Okay. So it says, share something that your 90-year-old self is proud of you for.
Mm. I actually love that question
Great.
because
But
that question in itself was almost what led me here. Led
yeah.
me here in the sense of my 90-year-old self would be so proud of myself for actually taking the leap
Hmm.
and choosing me and choosing what was, like, on my heart 1,000% because that was just there was always like, when we were talking about that worst case scenario, parts of it were, could I actually feel when I'm, like, as morbid as it sounds, on my
Yeah,
deathbed in my 90s, reflecting back on my life, would I be satisfied staying in corporate? And I
yeah,
always knew it would have been a no. Like, "Why didn't you take a risk
right,
on yourself? Why didn't you bet on yourself?"
yeah.
So, yeah, just ever
Oh,
so simply, it would be choosing me, choosing this path, just taking the leap and
mm,
trusting myself, finding safety and healing the ever-ending, like, journey here that it can be in
yeah,
the process, but constantly, yeah, showing up in ways that I know my soul needs, that for me to be able to evolve, to grow, and
yeah.
expand.
Oh my gosh, and however complex that is, like, perhaps it also just gets to be that simple of choosing
Mhm.
ourselves and showing up for ourselves, right?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be choosing yourself to go into business. It could be
Right.
choosing yourself even in a relationship,
Mhm.
right? Like, expressing those boundaries or leaving a relationship and choosing that. That
Yeah.
was another big thing at one point in my life too, but yeah, it's just the various ways that you can choose you today.
It's so true. Oh, I love it. What a beautiful note to end off on. Well, thank you so much, Mallory, and thank you to anyone who's watching live or catches the replay. If there is anything that stood out to you or any questions you have for Mallory or I, please comment them below or DM us, whatever feels good for you. We would love to hear, your thoughts and yeah, any questions you may have, we're here for that. So, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Mallory.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to have this conversation and also saw some of Christina's notes on the side,
Oh
so
my gosh, see, I'm like, don't know how to navigate this platform. I'm like, "Where are the notes? Is she
yeah,
here? Hi, Christina."
it's so great. I don't know if she's
There it
still
is.
here, but she was here and appreciate witnessing all her kind of feedback as well.
So good. I see that gain versus gap. Love that. Oh, thank you, Christina. Thank you, Mal, for pointing that out. I'm like, I don't know how to use this platform, but you did it.
We made it. We got through the
Thank you.
live here, and yeah, it went swimmingly well.
So good. Well, lots of love to both of you and all of you, whoever's here, whoever will be here. Have
Yeah.
a beautiful week ahead, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank